As you well know, quick, cheap, and easy oil pan gasket replacement on E90 N52 engine. Basically all the 3 Series model, naturally aspirated 3 Series models from 2006 to 2011. Here you go guys, so you will need to remove the shielding from underneath the engine, front and back. I already dropped the balance shaft down. The only special tool you would need is the engine support bar. Make sure you pressure wash the engine from above and from underneath, because that dirt is going to get into the new oil pan on the new gasket, and obviously you have to do the oil change anyway, so I'm dropping the filter, whatever oil is in the filter housing, down into the oil pan. So here, when you remove the filter, the oil is going to drain down into the oil pan, and you can see how this filter collapsed. It's not the right quality filter that you want to use on the N52 engine. Made in Vietnam. You want to use the MANN brand, MANN brand. That one is good. And I still have that new filter in order, so you can just put in the new filter in there and make sure you change the O-rings, both of them. They're really important on this N52 engine. 7 liters of oil will drain out of it, so make sure you got a good canister to drain the oil. At this point, I removed the stabilizer bar completely. It's much easier. It comes out easy. You just unbolt it, and you unbolt the rack and pinion and move it forward, remove the bolts. Obviously, you're gonna need the engine bar that holds the engine up. It costs like $80 at the Harbor Freight. You need one to hold the engine up, as you saw at the beginning of the video. Without that, you're not going to be able to do that job. That's the only special tool that you would need. At this point, I disconnected the sensor that's on the suspension that is for the headlights. You remove that. See, I put the jack underneath the subframe, and I loosened the last subframe bolt so it dropped down a little bit. Then I lowered down the subframe using a floor jack. You don't want it to drop down, it's kind of heavy. And you also want the engine bar to be high quality, and make sure you wrap it right, otherwise you don't want the engine to drop on you. That's how it looks. Power steering line also disconnected. The power steering rack does not need to be disconnected, but it'll be easier if you disconnect that. But I managed to do without it. This is because I have 2006, that's the oil return from the oil separator. So I just use a long skinny screwdriver to unplug it. And then you have on the back of the oil pan, disconnect the oxygen sensors, the holder for the oxygen sensors, the oil level sensor, disconnect that. Then you can unbolt the 2 holding arms for the transmission cooler lines. They're on the driver's side and they're in the way, so you got to unbolt a 10mm wrench and then move it aside. Unbolt all the bolts around the oil pan. Some of the oil is going to stay in the oil pan. Not everything drains down. Maybe half a liter is going to be in the oil pan, so some of it is going to drain down. Obviously it's a dirty job and really uncomfortable to do. So what I'm doing right now, I have to, with one hand, I have to push the subframe forward because I didn't disconnect the steering rack. Also, transmission cooler lines are kind of in a way, so you kind of like have to wedge it out a little bit. It's already down. All I gotta do is pull the subframe forward a little bit and take it out. And here, as you can see, the oil pan gasket is like plastic. I don't know why BMW uses this inferior material. It just hardens to plastic, and it doesn't seal anymore. It's all baked on there. For the oil pan gasket replacement, what I like to use is O-ring brand. It appears to be much better quality rubber than factory BMW. Here you can see how much oil you get left in the pan, like half a liter. So you got to be really careful. You don't want to spill it on yourself. Next is to clean the oil pan completely, and then clean all the surface around the inside of the engine bay where the oil pan goes. You don't want any dirt going in the new oil pan. This is the block of the engine. Some of the gasket may be on there, so you got to take a little bit of Scotch-Brite and just like wipe it down, you know, clean the mating surfaces. It has to be all clean in order for the new seal to seal properly. Here I cleaned the oil pan and installed a new gasket and put two small zip ties on there to hold it in when I'm putting back the oil pan underneath by myself in a really uncomfortable position. See, I'm holding in one hand, I'm holding the subframe, pulling it forward because I didn't disconnect the steering rack. I don't want to lose any of the alignment that way. And then you got to be really careful not to rub the new gasket against any dirty surfaces. Like right here, I kind of touched the transmission with it. So I'm gonna, with one hand, I'm gonna go over the gasket, make sure none of the contaminants fell on the gasket mating surface. And it's pretty easy, for me at least. When you have skills, it's kind of easier. If you don't have the skill, everything looks way more difficult than it is. And that's the oil return from the oil separator. It just plugs in. And there you go, the oil pan is installed. You have to use the new bolts. They're torqued to yield. If you try to reuse the old bolts, they're gonna break, and you're gonna have thread left in the block, and that's gonna be a nightmare. Don't do that. From here you can see the new gasket L-ring brand. Many people say positive things about this oil: restore and protect Valvoline, so I'm gonna use this oil. Yeah, and make sure you don't forget to put the oil back in the car. And that's the engine bar, holding bar. You can get one at the Harbor Freight. They're cheap, and then just sell it after you use it. You sell it, or if you're a piece of crap person, you can always return it back to them if they have the no question return policy, obviously, because you're only going to use it one time. But I have one because I work on cars all the time. I've been driving for 3 days and not a single drop of oil. All good.